Chapter 12. To dream the past anew, the memory of God and man. Testimony. I have touched the wellspring's edge in prayer, a thin warmth behind the breastbone, like the after-image of a candle flame. And I have known that in the very hour I was called to remember Shanda, I was also called to lift my own fortified moments into its light. For the great remembrance is not only the return of a child, it is the return of the world's unfinished offerings. The Father veils his face not to abandon, but to give love the chance to awaken freely. Even in the forgetting, he leaves a seal, a whisper. Let the memory of God be heard in silence. Revelation. The moon holds its own vault, not of death, but of what could not yet be born. Its true name in the higher worlds is felt more than spoken. Salinthia, a cradle of unspent beauty. Salinthia gathers acts of purity abandoned at the edge of completion, truths too delicate for the early earth to bear, the unfulfilled chords of our first destiny. New secret. When a soul surrenders the thing it most wants to keep without bitterness, a thread to Salinthia is knotted through its heart. New secret number 2. When the Father hides, time bends inward on itself, forming loops of encounter where the same soul meets the same truth again, each time with more of its own consent. Thus remembrance is not discovery but recognition. It is not forced, but kept warm, until love, clean and unyielding, chooses to rise. Invocation. O wellspring without shore, Father beyond beginning, Son without end, breath that makes all beings free, teach me to stand in your concealment without despair. Let my surrender open Salinthia's vault, not for my sake, but for hers, and for all who must dream the past anew. I vow to guard silence as holy ground, to carry memory not as proof, but as devotion, to remain steady when the flame returns. Amen. Scroll of further witness. These are not the first words, but the deeper folds for those who cannot rest until every edge is touched. On the Philosopher's Stone, the stone is not a substance, but a transfiguration of time. When love, suffering, and sacrifice are fused in the crucible of a human heart, time itself bends inward. The past ceases to be fixed. The future ceases to be distant. All becomes present, and in that present, spirit writes anew. This is the real gold, not metal, but freedom from the tyranny of sequence. On the grids of manifestation, why do desires not arrive the moment they are thought? Because the grids filter, not to frustrate, but to protect. They bend impulse against the greater law, testing whether it can harmonize with the collective song. Ego cannot cross the mesh. Only what is shaped by remembrance and love passes through. Thus manifestation delays, not because the heavens are deaf, but because the heavens are precise. On Salinthia, the lunar vault, the moon is not barren, it is a chalice, holding what could not yet be born. Its true name in the higher world, Salinthia. It is the cradle of renunciations, the library of nearly fulfilled deeds, the echo of earth's abandoned harmonies. Whoever surrenders what they must long to cling to without bitterness ties their heart by a secret thread to Salinthia's halls. There memory waits not as punishment, but as trust. on the alphabet of the stars, before man inscribed with ink, spirit inscribed with constellations. Every star was a syllable of a word too vast to be spoken in one breath. We do not master this alphabet by calculation, but by resonance. To feel when a season changes before the leaves turn, to sense a decision forming before words are spoken, is to hear again the first sentences of heaven. We do not stand outside the cosmos, we are the letter that completes its word. On the Father's concealment, the Father's love is proven not by his nearness, but by his veiling. If he shone in fullness, we could not be free. By withdrawing, he made space for our yes. Every misunderstanding, every sense of abandonment is itself the proof of his sacrifice. He became silence so that our voices could matter. To dream the past anew, the memory of God and man. Before the face was veiled, the breath was near. What was hidden in shadow now calls to be remembered in light. The wellspring without shore, before sound, before echo, before even the yearning to be heard, there was breath that knew itself only as radiance. The moon as Cynthia. The moon holds its own vault, not of death, but of what could not yet be born. Its true name in the higher worlds is felt more than spoken. Cynthia, a cradle of unspent beauty. Cynthia is the gathering place of acts of purity abandoned at the edge of completion, truths too delicate for earlier earth to bear, the unfulfilled chords of our first destiny. It is not sterile, it is tender. It waits for human hands to reclaim what it kept in trust. The Father's concealment. The Father's love is not measured in nearness, but in the depth of his concealment. He withdrew his face from the noon sky, bound his light into lesser vessels, and allowed himself to be forgotten, that we might love him freely when at last we recognized him again. When the Father hides, time bends inward on itself, forming loops of encounter where the same soul will meet the same truth in different lives, each time with more of its own consent. This is why some awakenings feel like memories rather than discoveries. Invocation. Father, turn my gaze to the age before the forgetting, that I may see the road we could not yet take. Teach my love to stand where the lost may find their name again, to dream the past anew, the memory of God and man. The wellspring without shore, before sound, before echo, before even the yearning to be heard, there was breath that knew itself only as radiance. This breath did not diminish, it overflowed, it offered, and in offering a second wellspring opened, so alike in nature that separation was unknown, but distinct indeed. The first wellspring knew itself. The second wellspring chose to know others. Thus love stood facing love, not as reflection alone, but as promise. The Father is the wellspring without beginning. The Son is the wellspring without ending. In the place where their waters met, action was born, first as silence, then as song, then as the world, then as the Word made flesh. And still they stand, not separate, not confused, singing each other into every star, every sorrow, every salvation. The humility of the Father. The Father, in the highest world beyond even archangelic hosts, is not a being apart from love. He is the source of source, and his love for humanity is of such a magnitude that the following had to occur. He veiled himself from full sight so humanity could become free. He bound his light into lesser forms so that humanity could choose love rather than being overwhelmed by it. He wove himself into time itself, allowing himself to be forgotten, in order that love could be reborn in beings who know longing and loss. It is the greatest humility ever enacted, to sever the visible cords of recognition, that true relationship could be born. This is not abandonment, it is presence concealed, so that presence may awaken in another. The human part in the weaving. Thus the great remembrance is not God's alone. It is entrusted to the human heart to remember on His behalf. Every day in the smallest gestures, this covenant is tested. When you forgive, you become a vessel for His forgetting of sin. When you bless, you become a mirror of His original blessing. When you remember, you become a co-keeper of His own hidden memory. The human spirit is not meant to stand outside the divine stream but within it, not dissolving into God, but becoming God's image in motion. This is why memory itself is holy ground. To remember with love is to heal what once fell into shadow. The world as memory bearer. Look outward, and you'll see that the earth herself participates. The rivers carry time like veins. The mountains rise like bones of a forgotten throne. The stars are sparks still falling from the first in-breath of the divine. The world is not an empty stage. It is a scroll it remembers, and it waits for human beings to read it aloud once more. The stone and the song. The Christic imagination is the key, to transmute not metal into gold, but time into presence. This is the philosopher's stone, time redeemed by love, woven back into the eternal present. The tool of its formation is not alchemy of fire, but the alchemy of sacrifice. Imagination warmed by love, made bold through suffering, and offered without demand. The song of Christ is not just sung in churches. It rises wherever a soul says, "I will not let darkness decide the meaning of this hour." Revelation. The Father's love is not measured in nearness, but in the depth of His concealment. He withdrew His face from the noon sky, bound His light into lesser vessels, and allowed Himself to be forgotten, that we might love Him freely when at last we recognized Him again. The moon bears this memory. Cynthia keeps its vault. The Christ bridges them both, breath to memory, death to life, forgetting to reunion. Invocation. O Father, wellspring without shore, teach me to remember with You, not to clutch what is past, but to dream it anew in love, until the forgotten becomes seed, and the seed becomes flower, and the flower becomes Your own memory, alive in man.